that still has effects for me, you know. So I flew into Boston Airport 2.5 weeks ago, and every time I get to the passport control, they scan my passport, and you can just see their little eyes go, bing, you know, like red and blue lights are flashing on the screen. And I always have to go for that second immigration check, you know. But at Boston, there's a blue line that goes down the airport towards the second immigration office. So this lovely TSA officer comes up to escort me with his hand on his gun and one hand on my shoulder. And he says, walk the blue line, ma'am. Talk about trauma and revisiting it. I was back walking that line. You know the one I'm talking about. You know. So I have to live with that, but I have a choice today. I know that is going to happen. I can prepare myself emotionally. I know I have done nothing wrong. I know I am not trying to stay in the country illegally, and I will return to the UK, but I have to go through that process. Or I make a choice not to come, you know? So when we were flying back and forth to try to rescue my daughter, she had a little boy. He was 1.5, and all of a sudden the priorities changed. If I couldn't help her, I had to help him, you know? So we did everything we could, and I did a lot of enabling, a lot of things I probably shouldn't have done. But eventually she made a Valentine's Day, 2018, her boyfriend beat her and strangled her to unconsciousness 8 times. And I took her to the emergency room, and I just remember the combination of his fingerprints and bruises on her neck, and the woman at the desk asking me for my credit card. And I was like, this is my daughter. Who cares about that right now? Let's deal with this. I had always enabled and taken care of her, but that period of 6 months before my daughter got to that point, I'd been working with a recovery coach in Houston. And she said, you have to have boundaries, you know, and you have to be able to live with every possible outcome of those boundaries. And so we could help her get to treatment, we could get her to a woman's safe house. She could choose to go back to where she was before. She could choose something completely different. She may end up under a bridge, or she may die. But I could only be responsible for providing a few of those, and I had to be okay with the choice she made in those outcomes. And that was really difficult for me as mom, you know. She chose to go to a safe house. She never thought I would actually go through with it and drop her off, but we did. As soon as I dropped her off, we drove around the corner, and I'll never forget, I just told my husband, stop. I opened the car door, I puked, I cried, and I was just like, how am I going to deal with this? But we did it, you know. After a week or so in the safe house, she decided to take the option of treatment. And she spent 97 days at Serenity Light Recovery in Angleton. And then I gave her the option to try to rebuild her life and her relationship with her son by coming to live with me in England. And then that's what Sharon alluded to. We got there, and I was like, holy crap. I Googled Naranon meeting on the internet in England, and it said 126 miles to my nearest meeting. Okay. Then Khalees was like, I need help finding a job and going to meetings, and where do I go? And she couldn't find the resources. And so I met with some women who started MCOPE in Houston, and we were talking about the power of a pissed off mama. You know, 4 of those ladies have all lost their children to overdose or fentanyl poisoning. And I was a pissed off mama, and I was like, right, how do I fix this? Why aren't these resources available? Why can't somebody in my country find a recovery coach, you know, and make a difference and do something? So I just started to figure out how to do it. I contacted Cynthia at the Houston Council. Somebody had told me when I was here, first of all, they told me, go to the Your Stories Have Power 1-day training about sharing your story for advocacy. And I was like, oh, crap. You know, but I went. I just needed stuff going on in my life. And when I walked into that room, I had one language, and that was, I am Naetha and I'm an addict. When I walked out of that room, my shoulders were higher, my head was high. I all of a sudden had a new language to talk about me, and that was, I'm Naetha and I'm a woman in long-term recovery. And it felt different. So like Amelia was saying to you, there is so much power in language and words. You know, when we reframe how we perceive ourselves versus how others perceive ourselves. And then I met Sharon, and she was like, oh, Naetha, this anonymous thing, you know? And I was like, oh, damn. And so then somebody said, go to this recovery coaching course. And I will never forget, it was day 2 of that training, and I was on the roof of the Houston Council parking lot, watching the sun come up in the morning with the coffee. And the only way I can describe it, I was like, recovery coaching. It is where my head and my business head and my smarts connected with my heart, and just fireworks went off. And I was like, I can have an impact here. All this stuff we have gone through as a family does not have to be for something bad. Something good can come out of it. So taking that information, getting to England, and then I was Googling, and I found this place in Connecticut that did recovery coaching, and I was like, oh, and then they did recovery coach facilitator training, and I was like, email, let me connect with them, and they were like, yep, come join. And COVID happened, so it was the first time they'd ever delivered that training online. And I believe that's a higher power God thing. You know, I rocked up to that training online, and then I realized, oh, if you're gonna be a facilitator, you gotta have 2 people to facilitate. My daughter Khalees, do you fancy doing this with me? And she had about a year in recovery. And she was like, yep, something to do. We're all locked in the house together. So we did all that training. And I happened to be in the training with the CEO of that organization. And at the end of it, he said to me, so what are you trying to do? And we had a conversation. And have you ever seen the movie Field of Dreams?